So today we are talking to James Bach, James Marcus Bach, um, who is known to be a software tester. He pioneered in that field, and we are very pleased to talk to him today. So hello, James.
Hi. I actually cannot pronounce my own name
Okay.
properly. I can't pronounce it the way you pronounce. I pronounce it Bach.
Ah,
When I
okay.
try to pronounce it in the German way, I throw up.
Okay. Is it actually an original German name you have?
Say again?
I mean, is it actually an original German name you have?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. My great grandparents, I believe, came from Germany.
Ah, that is why. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. But you don't know a bit of German? Or do you remember a bit?
No, I don't. I wish that I would get more work in Germany, so I would have an excuse to learn it. I would like to learn German. German's good to know. A lot of good philosophy is written in German, but unfortunately, I belong to an empire, and everybody wants to learn the language of the empire. So they all want to learn English. No one wants me to speak anything else.
Oh, yeah, well, that's true. It's international communication language.
Yeah.
So, if you could please introduce yourself a bit to our readers, what you are doing and what you kind of pioneered in, so that people have an idea.
Well, I'm famous for being a tester, but I started as a video game programmer. I wrote a video game starting in 1983 for the 2 and Commodore 64. In fact, we were doing Commodore 64 games before the publication of the technical reference. So we had to get our information from magazine articles and by calling the people who wrote the magazine articles to get tips from the to make sprites work and to deal with the vertical blank interrupts and things like that. After I did that for a few years, I started programming, and I was in great distress because programming is the only thing I knew how to do, and I didn't want to do it anymore. So then I got a job offer from Apple Computer to run a test team, and I found that I loved testing. Uh, to devote myself to testing, and throughout the 90s, I developed some new ideas in testing. I was a hippie counterculture tester guy who was nipping at the heels of the people who wrote testing books and basically arguing with them about everything because I thought everything they wrote was wrong. And it was mostly wrong. It was not completely wrong, but it was a lot of really bad stuff, bad advice, terrible advice in the testing world that was given to people. And so, what I'm famous for doing is bringing science to it. I like to read about the philosophy of science and reasoning and logic, and I tried to bring that to testing, which meant that that I brought social science into testing. Uh, I became especially for something called exploratory software testing, which basically means you think while you test. And amazingly, this was something amazing and new, because what was happening before I came along is people felt that the consultants who were dominating the field, they thought that what you should do is write everything down before you do anything, which in no field does anyone work that way. But for some reason, The people in the testing world thought, oh, this sounds like a perfectly reasonable idea. Don't do anything until we write it down first, way in advance. But it's just silly. It doesn't work. The most amazing thing is that you can't actually work that way. So what was happening, people would pretend to write down their tests beforehand, but they really would be thinking while they were testing and coming up with new ideas while they were testing. That was the way people really worked. They just didn't admit it. So really what I'm famous for, people to acknowledge the truth about what they'd been doing all along. And to make that respectable is what I worked on for years. And now I have a methodology called rapid software testing, which is sort of a martial art of software testing. And I teach people this kind of testing so that when the piece of software comes to them, they can do the martial arts on it. And
yeah,
that's what I
see.
do.
I see. Well, you were mentioning that you started as a coder. Actually, I read in the Gazette November issue of 1933 that actually one of your teachers was Jim Butterfield, which is very much known until, of course, his death in the Commodore 64 scene.
Yes, he was the guy that we called. I think he was in Toronto, and we called him. My boss, Dale Disharoon, to get information about how to program the Commodore 64. Yeah, he was very helpful to us.
So this is anyway. Interesting is also, as far as I know it, that you are not really thinking that the method of learning was suitable for you. So you decided to learn on yourself, on your own methods, right?
Yeah, yes, that's true. But that sounds a little more grand than it was. What I actually did is I was a big rebel causing lots of trouble. I would skip classes and I would get into fights. I got into a lot of fights. I've even fought. I had a fist fight once, which was exciting.
Okay.
And then, but I still, I should be in school. So I asked to. I wrote a letter to the school board and I asked to be able to just skip ahead some grades, and they wouldn't let me do that. So then my father said, well, just leave. You don't even need to stay here. And that was the first time that I thought that would be okay to leave. And that's a critical thing about any education, and certainly about my education, is I needed family support. And my father gave me support. He gave a helping hand. He gave me encouragement that made me feel okay about leaving. And now I do that for my son and for other people. And my father, I remember him very clearly telling me that he said, you can do your own education. You can run your own education. And I thought that sounded so me, because I thought he was telling me that I should open a school where I was the only student in it and the only teacher. It just sounded bizarre to me. But of course, that's normal. This is actually the way people have been learning for hundreds of years. Thinkers all over the world in every walk of life, through most of their lives, are running their own education. I mean, you're an adult now, your own education. We all run our own education past a certain point. We take control of it and we read what we want to read. And of course, we have mentors. We have people that can help us. And I found those mentors. My first one was Dale Disharoon, who hired me to be a video game programmer, insisted that I do good work and showed me how to do that. And he also taught me to drive a car. Taught me. He insisted that I learn a musical instrument. So we did various things together, and he was the first one to help me with that. But it was my responsibility. He just pointed the way and inspired me to be a better person. And then Chris Brown at Apple Computer, who gave me my start at Apple Computer, he became my mentor after that. And throughout the years, I've had a string of usually older men who have inspired me to be very good at what I do and have given me ideas about that. So I'm self-educated, but I'm really mentor-educated throughout most of my life, and now I'm to lots of other people.
Ah, I see. Interesting thing is, I read that you also were known for running your own company with a friend and doing educational software. And you did it at a time at 1983 where in the USA you had that video game crash thing. So I wonder how that affected you.
I'm the last part of what you said. I did it at a time when what? You say?
When that video game crash was in
Oh yes.
1983.
Yeah, that was a tough time. There wasn't much work. Actually, '83 was good. It was '84 when the crash started happening, and what I did in March of 1984 is I took 6 months off because I had made money from the video games that I did in '83 that I didn't need to work for 6 months. So I took 6 months off, got married at the age of 18, and then she spent all my money, so I had to go back to work again. And I did another couple of projects, but then we really started seeing a problem in getting enough work, and that was tough, and it was tough right up to about 1986. In '86, I was out of work, but the real problem, there was work for me in video games. The real problem is I was burned out. So there wasn't a whole lot of work in video games at that time in the place I was at anyway. What I didn't realize is that in Silicon Valley, which was 250 miles to the south of me, in Silicon Valley there was work, and I didn't know that. So I never tried to go work down there until a friend of mine urged me to send my resume down to a job shop. And the first company that had interest in me was a video company called Epix. And I was up for a job as a project manager at Epix. I didn't get it, and I was very depressed. Very depressed for weeks that I didn't get that job. Now, I was pretty young. I was 20 years old, but I felt like I had lots of experience with video games and that they should have wanted to hire me. But on the other hand, I'm a very intense personality, and I think they didn't want a crazy man to work for them. But Apple.
Well, I don't know if Epix didn't want me because of my personality, but I think it could very well have been my youth. I mean, obviously, I'd never run a project before. I'd never done any management. It's not unreasonable for them to have wanted to go with someone who was more experienced. You know, I don't want to make it seem like I was discriminated against or anything like that. Actually, it was pretty amazing that Apple Computer would hire me as a manager, given that I was younger than all the interns. I was the youngest manager at Apple Computer at that time, and in retrospect, it's a little bit a little bit crazy that they hired me. But the guy who hired me, Chris Brown, he later left the industry and became a psychotherapist.
Okay.
He he's the kind of person who wanted to help. He saw in me a project, a fixer-upper that he could do. So I think that's why he brought me on, and I'm forever grateful to him that he did that. And I try to do this to other people now. If people contact me and want my help in getting started as a technical person, I do everything I can to help them, because I got that help from other people who were established. So if I got that help, then I should turn around and give that help to other people if I can.
Of course, the counter side is you are very busy. I mean, your schedule is online and you are very, very busy.
Yeah, that is true. Fortunately, I married a woman who was the secretary at Apple Computer, and she's very good at that. So she's my secretary now, and she runs my schedule and makes sure that I'm in the right places at the right times. And so between the two of us, we run this business, and all I have to do is go where she tells me to go. Mm-hmm. And she woke me up 30 minutes ago and told me I was supposed to talk to you, and that's how it works.
So, since you worked for Apple, of course, the automatic question would be, how was it to work for Steve Jobs? I mean, you said you have an intense personality, but he was told to be even more intense.
Yeah, well, an interesting thing about that is that I joined Apple in May of 1987, and I was there until June of 1991. And during that period of time, Steve Jobs wasn't at Apple Computer. He was running Next. But so I was there when he was gone. So what I can tell you is that the week that I joined Apple Computer, there was a talk in the big auditorium, the big central auditorium at Apple Computer headquarters, about how bad Steve Jobs was to work for. Someone did this talk, and I was there. I saw it, about how all these terrible things that Steve Jobs did. So, he wasn't a popular man at the time that I worked there. But no one can deny, because he was there before I was there and after I was there. No one can deny that he got lots of great work out of the people at Apple Computer, and I think it would have been great to work at the same company as Steve Jobs, because then I like to be very passionate about what I do. I like to do really good work. I don't like rules that keep me from doing good work. I think that we should hire people who we develop trust in, and then we should trust them. We should let them do what they need to. Of course, they need to earn that trust, and they need to demonstrate doing, of course. But I think that what makes a company work is people rather than policies. And policies are helpful as long as they are under the control of people. And in fact, I was almost fired 3 weeks after I started at Apple Computer, and I was only saved because my manager refused to go along with the order that he was given to fire me.
Wow.
So he refused to do that, and he saved my job. Now, he was right. His boss wanted to fire me for a stupid reason, and that guy left the company soon after that. But again, I'm very grateful that my manager's attitude is he needs to do what's right. And later on, when I almost triggered a strike at the Apple Computer manufacturing plant because I offended the people who were working building Macintoshes. my my manager told me that he had previously said that as long as I learned from my mistakes, that I okay. And so I wrote this big apology. See, he didn't know that I had accidentally insulted the factory and made them very angry. Yeah, though that's what he said. And then when I accidentally through negligence and foolhardiness, I accidentally insulted the factory that was building all the Macintoshes and made them not want to work anymore. And nobody but me knew that it was me who did it. I decided to go public, and I wrote an apology to the factory, and I wrote an apology to the managers and everybody. And I didn't have to do that. I could have just stayed anonymous. See, what had happened is I was making bad jokes on a tour of the factory, and it was offending the people who worked in the factory, and I had no idea.
Okay.
I was making jokes about how they looked like chained to the assembly line, and I thought there should be guys with whips that were whipping them to make them work harder. I thought that was really funny, but turns out they didn't think that was funny.
Okay.
And then the next day there were posters, there was like flyers up all over my building, the Apple headquarters building, about how somebody had offended the factory, and that was harming productivity at the factory. And
Ooh.
yeah, right. So I was mortified, but I wrote an apology. And my manager found out, of course. I wrote an apology to everyone. I copied my manager. But nothing about that showed up on my performance review, or my next performance review. He just ignored it. And I was very grateful for that. And to me, that made me feel that he was being truthful, that we make mistakes and we learn from them, and as long as I learned as fast as I could learn and got better and developed myself as fast as I could, that was my safety. My safety was not in never making a mistake. It was in becoming better and better. So that's my attitude, and I got that attitude from Apple Computer and the management there.
So actually, Apple Computer helped you to develop the personality in your job that you have right now.
Yeah. My is a mix of the management training and experiences that I had at Apple Computer, mostly, and to some extent Borland International, which is where I worked after that. It's a combination of that and of my wild personality that I started with, which now has it's a lot smoother than it used to be. I really needed that management training. That was very, very helpful to me in my life, and also it helps to be a father too. That's another kind of training that is tremendously valuable. Because when you have a child, it's like having a boss. You have to treat a child very much like you have to treat a client or a boss. They behave in unreasonable ways sometimes, and you can't just ignore them, and you can't really fight them. You've got to make accommodations for them.
But you also have to show the borders at times.
Yes, that's true with management, and that's true with children too. There are certain lines, and so I don't just do anything for money. I've often been in situations where I've had to say no when my management has asked me to do things that I felt were wrong, and that's one reason why I work in my own company now. I started my own company 15 years ago. And that's that's more comfortable for me because it's very easy for me to say no to clients now compared to the way it used to be.
So you said earlier, well, we talked about Jim Butterfield who helped you to improve your coding skills and so on and show you how things work. And other things, other mentors would be, for example, as good as I know, Cam Kainer and Jerry Weinberg. Tell us a bit about those people, how you are
Yeah.
related to them.
Well, Kem Kainer is was kind of like an older brother type of person. When I met Kem in 94, he had been out of the testing industry for a while, and I had been established in the testing industry and was getting to be pretty well known. So we met each other as peers. But because he was older than me, and because he had a totally different education in the sciences, he has a PhD in psychophysics, which I just love saying, psychophysics. He was very influential because he was trying to get me to work to a higher standard of scientific reasoning about my work. So he inspired me to read more and be more meticulous in my work. And we had a long collaboration, lasted about 15 years. And Jerry Weinberg, I met him right around the same time. The interesting thing about Jerry is that Jerry's about 35 years older than me, something like that. And I had never met someone who was that much older than me who I really wanted to be. I had never had a role model who was a senior citizen that I can imagine myself being, when I grew up. And Jerry is very smart and very good at what he does. And I felt if I practiced for 30 years, I could be like him. And so I've been trying to do that, and I'm on the way.
So
I'm on the way.
He is your role model, so to speak.
Yeah. A lot of my work, most of my work is based on the work of Jerry Weinberg, and I've taken his work and I've extended it, and I've developed it within the world of software testing.
So speaking a bit about the past, how it all started, I spoke to David Crane a while ago, who did found Activision, and who also pioneered in the coding area and so on. And who also said he was responsible for the crash in 1983 because he made it look like it was easy to make money by creating tons of games. With the difference that his games were good and the other guys weren't. But he also said the problem was he had to do tools for testing, for coding, because there was nothing in the 70s or 80s. So how was it for you? What was the situation when you started your testing field? It was like a pioneering area, or was it like that?
Well, really, testing hasn't changed much in terms of how most people do it between 1987 and today. And unfortunately, should have changed much, but it hasn't changed much. And the reason is because most people who come into testing are young, and they don't stay in testing. So that means that they're in testing for a few years, and then they move on and do something else. And the lore, the testing lore, doesn't improve very much with them because they don't improve it. And then the ideas that they share with each other about how to test are all very primitive ideas. Of those who stay in testing, we're the people who actually upgrade the lore of testing. Unfortunately, that's dominated a lot by large consulting companies. And large consulting companies have no incentive to do testing well. You might wonder why they wouldn't have an incentive to do testing well. It's because they make a lot of money by doing testing badly.
Okay.
When you do testing badly, you can have lots of people doing testing, and then you make a lot of money if you're a consulting company because your clients pay for all those people. So you don't want to tell your clients, hey, you know what? If we do testing a lot better, instead of 10 testers, we can do this with 2 testers. They don't have no incentive to tell the government that is paying them to do this work, or to tell IBM that's paying them to do this work. They have no incentive to say, really, we can do it in a different and much cheaper way. The people who have an incentive to do things efficiently and cheaply and effectively are the product companies. But the product companies are not loud enough. They're not talking about their methods. Try to go find out how Apple tests its software. You won't be able to find anything about how Apple tests its software. They're not talking about how they test their software. They're not coming to the conferences. Apple is a particularly secretive company, so that's they're a little bit unusual in that regard. But many product companies don't say much about how they do their work, and testing is not a central part of what they do. So they just do it. They do it reasonably efficiently, perhaps, but they don't write books about it. They don't talk much about how they do it. Meanwhile, the consulting companies talk a lot about it, and they make a lot of money on it. So the testing world can be kind of backwards. Although the group that I work with, the community worldwide that I work with, we call ourselves the context-driven testers. And we have been developing our methods all along, and we have now quite advanced ways of testing. So I'll tell you that one thing that has changed tremendously in the last 25 years is that when I started, there was no support for testing self-education. There were books that people had written, but the books were wrong. The books were talking about techniques that didn't work, that you couldn't actually use. It's like, imagine books on parenting that talked about the importance of not letting your children in bright sunlight because it might harm their chi. There was that kind of nonsense, that just unscientific folklore passed around from person to person. Now there's lots of information about how to do testing well, and that's a lot of people in my community who publish their ideas and exercises. And right today, if you want to learn to be a good tester, there are lots of people who will help you for free to do that. There are conferences that focus on testing skills. We know a lot more about testing skills than we used to. The word heuristic was unknown in the testing world when I started, and now it's a common concept, the concept of testing heuristic. And if you don't know what the word heuristic is, that's okay, but we do. And we've taken lessons from other fields, and we brought those lessons into testing. So it's not the tools that have evolved. I mean, yes, the tools have evolved, but that doesn't matter that the tools have evolved. The reason why it doesn't matter is because the tools that helped us test 20 years ago don't work anymore. As technology grows, you need new tools and new tools and new tools. And so technology keeps making your tools obsolete, and then they just have to build new tools. So you're always in a situation where you don't have many tools. that work well. We don't have a lot of testing tools that are worth anything. So I build my own test tools as needed on a project by project basis. But the thing that has evolved is how to teach testers how to learn testing. We know a lot more about how to teach testers today, a tremendous amount more. And I freely share that information, although it's my business to go and share this information to people. They pay me to do this. I also do it for free on an as available basis. I will teach other testers because that's also how I do my marketing.
So, so what's your opinion about technique nowadays like agile development or Scrum? What's your opinion about that?
Well, that's stuff that we developed in the 90s as a reaction to the crazy ways that people were trying to develop software. And the most important thing to think about Agile, I think, is that Agile is about combining learning with technology development. It's a form of technology development that accepts that we're going to learn as we go. And that's very important because we were learning as we go before Agile, but people weren't admitting it. And now we're out in the open and we admit that we learn as we go when we develop technology. Unfortunately, there's no substitute for human skill and ingenuity. So many people, of course, want shortcuts. They don't want to go through the hard process of learning their craft. And so too often people say words like agile, but they don't actually understand what that stuff means, and they don't know how to do it. So they'll use the words, and they end up doing the same old cruddy stuff that fools have done for years. And making terrible mistakes and not learning from them. So that hasn't changed. It's always going to be this way. It takes skill to develop software, whether you do it in an agile way or in a non-agile. It takes skill to develop software. You've got to practice your skill. You've got to learn your craft. You've got to know how to do these things, and that means that you've got to learn how to do them, and that means that you have to make mistakes and work through those mistakes. And hopefully you have a mentor or you have a coach who helps you do this faster rather than slower. It took me about a decade to learn to test in a way that was that I could respect, but I can help people get to that point in a year instead of 10 years because I've already been through the labyrinth.
So if you look at it, everything is, as to say, getting faster, and products are coming out sooner and they are more advanced. What do you think will be your work look like in 10 years from now or 5 years from now? How will it be for you? What's the next big step?
Well, the first step for me was to learn how to test and develop software. Okay, I did that. And then the next step was to learn how to teach people to test, and I did that. And I'm really good at that. Now the next step for me, and I'm developing this right now, is to systematically teach people to teach people this stuff. That's what I'm working on now. I do teach people to teach people testing, or teach people development. I do that, but I don't have a systematic way of doing it yet. I'm developing that. So I'm working on a book on coaching, based on a formal model of coaching that I created, and I'm experimenting with that, gathering data, many experiences of coaching, so that I can have a book that's grounded in reality instead of my fantasies. It's a really interesting challenge. So I think in another 5 years, I think that I'll probably have my system worked out pretty well, and I'll be able to show this system to other people and teach other people how to be good teacher of technical people.
Well, that's pretty interesting. I mean, as you know, I was talking to a lot of other pioneers in the past, and the thing is, you travel a lot, you teach people even for free, and you go abroad and so on. So, do you actually plan to do this like in 30 years? Or do you plan to slow it down after some point and maybe even go into pension?
Uh, I travel a lot. I've been around the world twice this year, and before the end of the year, I'll be going to Australia, Switzerland, the Netherlands, Sweden, and Abu Dhabi. So uh, it's hard to travel this much, and I will not be able to do this for very much longer. I mean, maybe another 10 years, but sometime in the next 10 years, I have to slow it down.
Okay.
And uh, what I'm transitioning to is online training. Uh, but this is also why that I'm switching to my next challenge, which is teaching people to teach this stuff, because I'll have other people who will be teaching my stuff or stuff that will be their stuff and my stuff, and I'll help them get going, and then they'll do that stuff, and then I'll get a little royalty or something.
Mm. But but the thing is, are you trying to? I mean, did you think about stopping it altogether and enjoying your life? Because um, I was talking to other people. For example, Ralph Baer, who invented home video gaming. He is 92 and he is still teaching people and he is still inventing electronic toys. Or other people like Chuck Peddle, who invented the first affordable microprocessor. He's still working nowadays with 76. So I found a lot of people who pioneered the field, they never stop actually working or improving. This is why I'm asking you if you also have such a deep connection to your work that you can't let it go.
Well, I wrote a book about this called "Secrets of a Buccaneer Scholar," and in this philosophy that I live by, I don't separate my life and my work. I'm not capable of doing that. I My work is tied up with my self-respect, and I don't intend to retire from having self-respect. I work doing things that give me energy. I especially love working with younger people. I get really excited when I see them grow. And I think the older I get, it seems like there's an endless supply of younger people for me to help. So that it looks like that's going to be a very fruitful thing for me in the future. Jerry Weinberg is still involved with helping students, and he must be in his 80s by now. And I'm gonna carry on his work in the sense of helping people, just like he's my role model in many other things. He's my role model in helping other people. I get a lot of energy from doing what I do. I enjoy being an expert, and I enjoy sharing my expertise, and I enjoy helping other people become experts. Now, having said that, if I won the lottery, I would retire from testing immediately,
Okay.
and I would probably get an apartment on the campus of MIT, and I would build robots. There's lots of things that I would do: study history, study philosophy, things that I wouldn't worry about getting any money for, that would also give me lots of excitement and self-respect and zest for living. The testing stuff that I do is something which gives me that intellectual stimulation and that social stimulation that I need, but it also allows me to pay the bills.
Okay.
And I can't think of any reason why I would stop doing it, except that I need to stop traveling so much. I am traveling way too much, so that's why I'm doing more online training.
Mhm.
I have an online class that I'm going to teach in a couple of days here. I'm getting ready for, and I would love to stay home more. I'd love to have people come to my island more often instead of me going to their islands. So that's going to happen as I go on, and that will improve my lifestyle because I love my dogs, and I like being near my wife and my son. And I would just as soon just stay on this island a lot more, because I live on Orcas Island off the coast of Washington State. It's very beautiful here, very quiet, and I enjoy traveling, but I don't enjoy traveling so much that I want to do it 300 days a year. But that's what I'm doing right now, is about
Of course.
300 days a year of traveling, and that's a little bit insane.
Of course, yes. Now the thing is, you said you earn your money that way, but you also said you try to help people even for free. So how does this fit? Earning money, but also sometimes giving your expertise to people, to younger people who otherwise couldn't afford it for free. How does this fit together?
Oh, okay. Well, that's actually rather easy to explain. There's a few aspects to it, but it's easy to explain. First of all, I'm not on projects very much anymore. I used to be on projects, but now companies can't afford to hire me to be on projects, and my personality is like big. I'm very egotistical, so it's hard for people to bring me in because they know that I'm going to have all these opinions and tell them how to do things, and they'd rather do things their own way. It's kind of like my son always wants to do things his own way, right? Doesn't want to have his dad telling him what to do. It's the same thing. So, but the final thing is that not only am I expensive, but I don't have the time. I mean, I can't just drop everything and spend 3 months on a project anymore because I have clients. I've got many, many clients, each one for a few days, and I just go from one to the next, to the next, to the next. So if somebody tried to hire me for a project, I couldn't start until February at this point, or March. Actually, I already have things scheduled in March. So since I'm not on projects, what I have to do is I have to create my own projects, my own opportunities to gain new experiences. So one way I do that is helping people for free, you see. Because when I help them for free, I can do things that I can work with technologies that I've never worked with before, and it's okay if I'm not very good at it because I'm learning. I get lots of new data about people when I coach them for free. I'm practicing my coaching skills. I'm honing my ways of explaining things, and also I assign them different things to test, and that becomes a little mini project. And then I see what they did, and that's fresh experiences for me. And sometimes I have to show them how to do it. So that's, again, fresh experiences for me. So one of the reasons why I do that is because I need to stay sharp. To stay sharp, I've got to do little project type things. And if no one's going to hire me to do that because I'm too expensive, well, then I better do it myself. And helping other people while I'm doing that makes it interesting for me. Secondly, this is how I do my marketing. I call it my 20-year marketing plan. I get hired by people that I helped 20 years ago. And now they run companies, and they say, I remember James Bach. Let's have him come in and be a consultant. You see, I'm going to Abu Dhabi in December to teach at a bank because somebody worked with me at an earlier project at Barclays Bank. And I went to Barclays Bank because the manager there had met me 8 before and saw me at a conference, and I talked to him there. So this is my marketing. I help people on a time available basis. I enjoy doing it because I learn and I grow from it, and I enjoy watching people improve themselves. Sometimes I charge for my coaching. I mean, sometimes companies will pay me to do coaching, in which case I'll be at a certain time in a certain place. The free coaching I don't schedule, so it's something I do when I feel like it, but I almost always feel like it. I just really enjoy it.
So you are getting your money by being referred, actually.
Yes, that's right. To give you one specific example, a fellow from Croatia contacted me for a coaching session, a free coaching session. I gave him 2 coaching sessions, and suddenly his company hired me to teach a class, and that was $18,000 of profit. So
Not
helping
bad.
people for free once in a while turns into thousands of dollars of profit for me.
So you said earlier you also developed your own tools for testing. Could you give me an example of what you invented and created to do your testing job in a project?
Yeah, I write tools for all kinds of purposes. Are you familiar with a mind map? You know what a mind map is?
Yes, I know, of course.
All right. So I was testing XMind, a famous free mind mapping program, right?
Yes, I know that program actually.
Right. Well, this is an example of one of the projects that I invented for myself in order to keep myself smart, and I wrapped a testing class around this product of testing XMind. And as part of that, I wrote a tool that generates random mind maps. It writes mind maps directly to the file format of XMind. So I wrote a program that created a 5,000 node, randomly structured mind map with random labels on it and random markers on it. And that was a tool that helped me stress test XMind. That's an example of writing my own testing tool. You see, a testing tool is any tool that helps me test. There's all kinds of tools that can help me test. I can have tools that help spot bugs, but don't actually tell the program to do anything. I can have tools that tell the program to do things. I can have tools that analyze or produce test data. I can have tools that help me organize my test platforms or set up my test platforms. There's all kinds of tools. Any tool can be a test tool. My favorite test tool is Google.
Seriously?
And-
How?
Oh, yeah.
How?
Well, because if I need something, I just Google for it. And it turns out that somebody else has already written a tool that decodes an encoded a UU encoded string, base 64 encoded string, and there are tools just to do all kinds of stuff that if I want to analyze a file, I'll find some tool that already analyzes files by Googling for it. So my first stop is Google to find the tools that I need to do things. Excel is my next most favorite test tool. I use Excel for lots and lots of purposes. My third most favorite test tool is Notepad++, nice free portable notepad tool. And finally, Perl. I write a lot of the things that I do in the Perl language. Another little example of something that I created, I think it's one of the few things that I've actually invented as a tester, rather than, I'm famous for naming things that other people have invented that they haven't realized that they invented, and then I name it, and then I get credit for it. But one thing I invented was counter strings. I wrote a tool that creates strings that count their own length. And that's good because when you're pasting in a really long string and it gets cut off, you don't have to work to find out how long the string is. You just look at the end of the string, and the code of numbers that is at the end of the string tells you how long the entire string is. That's called a counter string.
Wow.
So I wrote a program called PearlClip that creates counter strings and a few other things. Um, it's basically a test data generator that you can download from my website.
So you offer your tools for free?
Yeah, because I don't make tools are not my main business, and I don't want to have to update or maintain them. So I just give tools away, and what I charge people for is my time.
Hmm.
If you want me to be at a certain place at a certain time, then I'll charge you for that, unless I really like you, like in your case.
Oh, thank you. Well, I was hoping you wouldn't charge me because we don't make
Yeah.
any profit this way.
No, this is marketing, so I love doing this anyway.
So it's on the internet and it will refer people to you and maybe you will get a job
Sure.
out of that. I see. So
Yeah, yeah.
this is how your business works. Um,
Yes, very simple. If you want advice about how to go into business for yourself as a consultant, just share knowledge with people very freely. Don't hold anything back. Share everything with them. I'll share anything with my best work. I'll share that with people, and then they assume that I have even better stuff that I haven't told them about.
So, if we look at the development of products, right now the smartphone and pad market is coming pretty much
Yeah.
right now. So, what's your opinion about the smartphone and pad type? What do you think about that? Will
My
it be
opinion about
will it make it harder for people to test? Because for example for Android you have like thousands of variants of phones and you cannot really be sure that all programs run on it.
this is what I meant when I said that tools are constantly becoming obsolete. So really, we're in the same situation that we were in 1987, where we didn't have good tools to test with, and we still don't have good tools to test with. Not because no one's developed tools. The reason is because we have old tools, but now we have this new technology, and we're back to square one again. Yeah, it's a big problem. These devices that there's no effective test uh, execution automation tool that we can use for iPads and Androids and that sort of thing. And like you say, there's a million different flavors of Androids. So what that means is that testing can be rather labor intensive, and that's the way that it's going to be. But you know what else is labor intensive? Programming is labor intensive. Design is labor intensive. So it's really no different from the problems that programmers have. They have to write code. After all these years, they still have to write code. That's right. And we still have to test by looking at software, interacting with our components. But there's something else that's going on, which is rather ominous, which is a bigger deal, but it's related to the thing that you just brought up, the fact that there's all these different platforms. And that is that quality standards are low, and they're going to be pushed as low as companies can push them. In other words, people are accepting software that's bad software, but they live with it. And you know, I only pay a couple of dollars for an app. It doesn't have ads in it, but it may crash a lot. It may be flaky in all kinds of ways, but I don't throw my iPad down. I shrug and delete it from my iPad and hope that there's something out there that's better, and I kiss my $2 goodbye.
But isn't that also a side effect of the change that we have nowadays? when it comes to software quality. I remember when I was talking to David Crane, he said back in the 70s, 80s, you only had one chance to make a good working program, and nowadays you just apply a patch, and and the problem is fixed. Isn't that a side effect of that internet and update and customer will be beta testers for your program mentality?
Well, I mean, yeah, but that's not a good thing. Look, when eBay was hacked and 150 million accounts were compromised, they can't just roll back and fix that. There are some obviously there are some problems that are not a big deal that you can patch and they are a little bit annoying and then they go away. I mean, obviously that's true, but there are also lots of other kinds of problems, which are much more serious than that, and which actually hurt people in a way that is irrevocable. I'll give you an example. Dropbox, right? Do you use Dropbox?
Of course, yes, I do.
Yeah, I'm trying to find a lighting situation here that works better. Let's see. What makes me look more sinister? If I color like that, or okay. I'm trying to get myself not too terribly. Oh, I'm sorry.
No
I'll try
problem.
that.
No
I'll try that. All right, so I use Dropbox, right? I rely on Dropbox, okay? But two interesting things have happened to me while using Dropbox. One is I discovered that a zip file that was a gigabyte and a half in size had been corrupted. It wasn't corrupted before I was using Dropbox. Suddenly I found that it was corrupted. And it's a good thing that I hadn't thrown away my old backups, because what that file represented was all of the email between 1995 and 2008
Ooh.
that I had before I moved to Gmail, and it was all in one zip file, and all of the copies on Dropbox were corrupted so that the zip file wouldn't open. I retrieved the thing from an old backup, and so I was saved by that. But what is Dropbox going to do about that? If I lose that data, I lose that data. They can't save that data for me. I rely on Dropbox not to corrupt my large files. But if they do, they just shrug. Oh, sorry. So that's one thing. The second thing is that I was uninstalling Dropbox on a Macintosh I was about to give away, and I deleted everything. And I'm sure that I uninstalled Dropbox before I deleted everything. But I think what happened is I must have uninstalled it, but not rebooted. And because of that, perhaps, Dropbox decided that when I deleted everything, that it meant that I should delete all of my files, which is 47 gigabytes, on every computer that runs Dropbox.
Ooh.
So everything got deleted. All of my stuff got deleted. Now, I was saved by the fact that I had chosen an option in Dropbox where I could restore from deleted files. But the problem is I didn't know which files I had recently deleted and which files I hadn't. So I just restored everything. So I have a whole bunch of junk now in my Dropbox, and also this took many hours to work out.
Oh.
Now that's a quality problem with Dropbox. That's a serious usability problem. I was trying to only remove it from one computer, and I got removed from every computer. There should be large warning signs when it detects that I'm deleting everything in my Dropbox folder. Are you sure you want to do that? This is going to delete it on all your computers. That's what you want, right? So that was maddening. Now, Dropbox is not going to go out of business because of that. Now, if lots of people complained about that sort of thing, then maybe they would make some changes. But they're in a position now with Dropbox to ruin my life in an important way. And I have to be savvy enough as a computer user to prevent my life from being ruined. A lot of companies like Google are assuming that everybody is really good at computers. I am really good at computers, but my wife is not.
Okay.
But my wife has her son and me to help her. If she didn't, then she'd be yet another person whose system would be full of viruses, and who would be completely at the mercy of hackers and such, and who would have a miserable online experience and would try to minimize her use of computers. So she calls me in order to get her Outlook view settings changed because she can't figure out how to change her Outlook view settings. And the thing is she knew how to change her Outlook view settings in the old version of Outlook. But she was forced to upgrade to a new version when she changed her computer. And now she's got to learn the whole new way of getting things done in Outlook. She didn't want to learn that, and it doesn't work the way she wants it to. And she just has to go along with it because Microsoft decided that this is the way it has to be. This is not any kind of Shangri-La of modern technology. This is annoying. It's a real quality problem. So when companies like Microsoft shrug and say, well, most people like it, they'll get used to it, I'm sure they'll figure it out, we'll just patch it, that's actually not a good thing. That's a terrible thing. What they're doing is they're using their power in abusive ways. Big companies have tremendous power when we start using their systems. And they often allow us to use their systems for free, but it's not really free because, for one thing, they're getting our data. That data is worth a lot of money to them. So they're getting something from their users that is worth a lot. And, of course, they turn around and provide users with functionality, and that's a good thing. But they have to be responsible about that. And I think not enough of these companies are really mindful of how much damage that they can create if they do some of these wild experiments on people without testing them with care.
Do you actually spend the time and write to the support of Dropbox or write to Google about your findings and suggestions to improve it, or do you think it's a waste of time? And as you say, people of such big companies, they just shrug and say your problem.
No, it's a waste of my time.
Okay, so you're not doing that actually. Okay.
No, I would if they listened, but they don't listen.
So,
I have occasionally written filled out feedback forms to Google. I never hear anything from them.
okay.
Also, I have insider information about some companies because I have friends there. So I know that in many of these companies, they don't even pay attention to this stuff that comes in, these user comments. My time is worth a lot to me. So I'm not going to spend my time throwing it at a bunch of people who don't deserve to be helped.
So do you think that those companies like Dropbox or Google, they have a lack of proper testing? Would testing improve that situation? Or is it a matter of usability? Or what's your opinion about that?
Well, I do think that they probably have poor testing, but that's a symptom of a bigger problem, and that is that they probably my impression is they don't care very much about their users. They don't have a lot of empathy for them. I don't think they take their responsibility very seriously. I think it takes these companies by surprise when they become vital in people's lives, like Twitter. Twitter became vital in running businesses and running the lives of people. I mean, journalists, social movements use Twitter, and I think that took the Twitter company by surprise at first. They realized how important that they were. That this is not just a little thing where you tweet about some food that you ate, but it becomes something where people are tweeting about getting arrested at riots and that sort of thing. So I think these companies, they begin as startups. They're usually started by very young people. These young people have dreams of doing cool things and getting rich. And foremost on their minds is not social responsibility. If it was foremost on their mind, then they wouldn't do a lot of these things, and they would never get rich.
Well,
you know, I mean,
yeah.
So the thing is that this is really, a lot of this is about fun and money. What it is not so much about is social responsibility. It takes society to push back against these companies and insist that they are socially responsible. And that's what you're seeing in the European Union right now, where Google is being forced to operate in certain ways to protect data, because governments have to act to tell companies that the things that you just think are cool are not necessarily good for the public.
But shouldn't know Google better by now? I mean, we had similar issues with Microsoft like 10 years ago, 14 years ago. Shouldn't a company like Google be aware and not repeating the same mistakes that Microsoft did?
I think they're driven by money. I think they want to. They're a public company. They want their share prices to be high. I think that in companies like that, it's really about people are working to get their bonuses, and that's the thing that drives people. Let me offer a thought experiment. If you were Bill Gates and you started Microsoft, and it was successful, and you started getting really rich, at what point do you say, enough? I have enough money. I think for me, it would have been about $50 million. I would say, that's it, $50 million. Now, he went for $50 billion. I don't understand that. I feel, I mean, I just can't imagine what I would need more than $50 million to do anything that I want to do in life. I guess make a giant piano out of yachts. I don't know, with each yacht being a key and a huge piano you can see from space. I don't know what. If I were Bill Gates, you see, I would have quit a long time ago, and I would have had a fleet of. I would have been like Jacques Cousteau, and I would have had a fleet of helicopters and airplanes and boats, and I would just go around the world solving Bigfoot mysteries, and that would be just fun. Okay, these rich people have no idea what to do with their money. So, for me, you see, I am not going to run a company like Google because I have different priorities. You see, Google is not going to learn from the mistakes of Microsoft, in the sense of hey, maybe we shouldn't be creating driverless cars because driverless cars are fundamentally irresponsible to be created. Um, so maybe we should stick to things that are more safe and reasonable, because being safe and reasonable isn't how they got rich, and it's not how they're going to stay rich. You could even argue that Microsoft's struggling now because they're not crazy enough, that they need to be more unreasonable. Everybody thought it was strange when Apple started making phones. I thought it was strange when Apple started making phones, but boy, that sure made a lot of money for them, didn't it? And it changed the world. And then Google starts making a phone, and you go, what? They're gonna do another Android? What's that? And well, that turned out to be successful. Companies. By the way, it's irresponsible. Android is irresponsible. We don't need Android. We could have done it all with iOS, but Google wants to compete, and some people want to use non-Apple products, and so I have a Samsung, but only because T-Mobile wouldn't offer me an iPhone. The point is that I think about social responsibility, and because I think about social responsibility, I'm never going to create a company that gets sold to Google and makes me a whole lot of money. I'm going to be poor forever because I am using what I think of as good judgment.
So it's interesting how this all is connected. Software development, software testing, and now you are talking about social responsibility.
Yeah.
So shouldn't be your next phone be a Fairphone? You probably heard of that.
A Fairphone? I actually haven't heard of that. What is that?
It's a phone that is made out of conflict-free materials, and it's made by a company who tries to always have fair payments for the workers and so on. You actually never heard of that?
No, I haven't. That sounds cool, but it occurs to me that you can also have an all conflict phone. You can have a phone that when you buy it, you know that every dollar goes to crushing your enemies.
Yeah, and that is what they are trying to change. They are trying to make a phone like fair trade coffee or something.
Yes, yes. Well, I think that's cool, and I think that's one thing that I love about internet culture, about what the internet has made possible. And you realize that the internet is not the work of any one company. It started out as a government project. It's this thing that is relatively free and open, and we hope that net neutrality will prevail in the United States, and for it to remain and open as it could possibly be, and available to as many people as it possibly could be available to, because then that becomes a platform where people can do things that allow them to be socially responsible. I use technology that Google creates. I use technology that Microsoft creates in order to do things that I think are good for humanity, or they make me feel good, and are not necessarily designed to make me the most money that I could possibly make. And so I'm definitely benefiting from what these companies are doing, but I do think these companies could do better if they put a priority on that. Google could test its software more responsibly. Google Microsoft could test its software more responsibly. They could, if they decided that, for instance, if they decided they wanted to eliminate security problems, they could do that. But doing that would require that they would have to go so slow, very slow in their work. And they don't want to go slow. They want to go fast. And if you want to go fast, then that means you are going to create a bunch of security problems when you develop your new technology. This Fairphone you're talking about, it either will be developed very slowly and carefully, or it will have a bunch of security holes.
So you gave me a link just then.
Yes. That was the Fairphone.
Fairphone. Together we can change the way products are made. We're putting social values first and opening up the supply chain. Well, wow, that's quite an interesting project. Now, is it going to make money?
Well, they are charity based. They are not really making money of it. They are made by Norwegians who collected some money to bring up this company and develop the product. They wanted to prove that it's possible to do the same we do with coffee, like Fair Coffee, with smartphones.
I don't think the phone part of this is the important thing. I think what's the important thing is that in order for humans to survive another 100 years as a viable civilization, we need to figure out how to work together and work our technologies in a way that doesn't destroy our vital resources. We need to have a sustainable way of life. So this is all part of that. It's all how to do this. That's I think the real benefit of this is just learning how to do it. Of course, we've got lots of challenges as a species with all the wars and all that, and what we're talking about is just a tiny part of the big equation. But what a fulfilling and meaningful thing to work on. It sounds wonderful.
So let's go back to how big companies are not caring about the users. Let's put an example. For example, some few years ago, I think it was last year or something, Microsoft bought Skype. And the first reaction from the community, from the Skype community was, okay, now that Microsoft owns Skype, the first thing they will do is they will shut down the Android app, they will shut down the Mac app, and they will shut down the Linux app, because they only support Windows Phone and Windows operating system for PCs. And interestingly, the opposite happened. When Microsoft took over, they actually shortly after released new Macintosh and Linux versions, and in contrast to the past development, they actually tried to make the Linux versions and the Mac versions being up to date as much as the Windows versions, because when eBay was owning Skype, the Linux and the Mac versions were always a bit behind when it comes to features and to bugs. The Linux version would be pretty much bugged, it would crash a lot and so on. So isn't that kind of the opposite of your earlier statement that companies like Microsoft don't care, but because for some reason they decided to even improve the product for platforms they are not really having a market into or making profit from it?
Skype is not Microsoft. Microsoft bought Skype, but Skype is a company that's run out of Estonia. I've taught my testing class at Skype a couple of times. There's some good people there. They take their testing seriously. I was a beta tester on Skype for a period of time. So hopefully they will, I hope that they will maintain the level of care that I saw that they have at Skype, and not let this culture of ignoring skills infect Skype. I hope that they will continue to care about testing skills and continue to care about producing a great experience for the user. Now, I use Skype intensively, and I think Skype has been getting better and better. I don't see a reason why I would want to stop using Skype. There are lots of alternatives to Skype that I could use in case Skype falls apart somehow. But what I've found is that Skype's been getting more reliable over time, and I'm I'm quite happy with it. At the same time, there are issues with Skype that I don't understand why they haven't been fixed. And I made these complaints to Skype people, and it's, you know, there's certain strange things about Skype that I'd like to see changed. But you know, it's pretty good. Skype's pretty good, and it's quite reliable, I think.
So it's an example of a big, huge company, meanwhile, that didn't get, well, a lack of quality when they grew.
Yeah, it's not that large companies have to not care about quality. I mean, and every company thinks it cares about quality. Their management will say they care about quality, but if you actually go inside these companies and see what they value, what they're pushing people to do, that find out where they really stand on things. eBay, for instance, they there's many that they just let stay in eBay, and I've reported them, and I have filled out at least one feedback form about bugs in eBay. They don't seem to get fixed. I don't use eBay anymore. I use Amazon because Amazon is a cleaner experience for me. But I want to use eBay. My brother works at eBay. I want to support my brother. But I just feel that eBay puts too much priority on new features and not enough priority on the user experience. I think that Amazon puts more priority on the user experience and seems concerned that I'm happy as a customer to be using Amazon.
I see. So, speaking about features and implementing, what do you think about this well, conflict of interest between software development and software testing? I mean, as you know, I'm a software tester myself, and sometimes I think there is this problem that as a coder, as a developer, you don't see your bugs, you don't see your problems, and of course you really hope that the testers don't find the bugs. On one hand, of course, the company wants to have a bug-free software, but they want to have it fast and with as little testing as possible. On the other hand, the tester is trying to convince the development that the bugs have to be ironed out. So this is like a never-ending battle in a way.
Well, sure, yeah. Companies want there not to be bugs in the product to begin with, and as soon as they hire a tester, they're admitting that they might have bugs in there, and they hope that there are no bugs there, so they hope the tester doesn't find anything. To some degree, in a certain way, there is a conflict of interest, but it isn't a conflict of interest as long as people understand what's really going on. And the way that I explain it is the testers are the headlights of the project. Just as you wouldn't drive your car at night on a freeway without headlights, you also wouldn't try to drive your project fast at night without headlights, and testers are those headlights. So when you think about it that way, then we realize it's not a conflict of interest. Those headlights are helping you. Those headlights are allowing you to go faster than you otherwise could go safely, okay? You can take more risk in a sense because you have testers. Testers are constantly scanning for those risks. And if you don't have testers, well, then you're You're hoping for the best.
Hmm.
It's kind of like being, if you don't have a tester, it's like having a train on train tracks, and you're saying, well, there shouldn't be any other train on the train track. There shouldn't be anybody on the train track. It's all ours, so we really don't need to look ahead of us. Except that people do walk on train tracks, except that sometimes cars do get stalled on train tracks. So you still need to look ahead of you. It's fine to say, let's just do it right the first time, but we don't know how to do things right the first time. We don't know how to prevent entirely bugs to happen. We know how to prevent some bugs some of the time. So testing is, on one level, it might seem to be not in our interest, project manager. But that's a little like saying, I'm going to turn my phone off so that nobody could call me to tell me that there's that someone in my family is sick and that I need to go help them, or that no one can call me about a tornado coming. I'll just turn my phone off and then my life will be better. Well, your life won't be if you don't have information about what's going on in it. You could say that newspapers have a conflict of interest. They know that if they give us bad news, we might stop reading the newspaper, and they want to sell us the newspaper, so maybe they should only put fun things in the newspaper. And actually, there are some news organizations that do a lot of that. If you go to CNN.com, you'll see lots of clickbait, lots of things that are kooky stories that are entertaining. They're not important news, but they make people want to come back to the website, apparently. So they put them out there so that people will click on them. I think similarly, a tester on a project, we need to learn how to speak to developers and speak to management in ways that they want to listen to us. We need to make them want to listen to us. And it's very similar to being a father for me. I suppose a mother if I was a woman. I need to speak to my child in a way that my child wants to listen to me. And that means that I have to not say certain things that I want to say, that I feel like saying, because I know if I say those things, then they'll stop listening. So sometimes to be a little bit circuitous in the way that I report problems. And I always have to be friendly, respectful, encouraging, or else they will shut down, and then I won't be able to do my job.
So you say, being a software or a beta tester or hardware tester, being any kind of tester, you also have to have the soft skill of being very social and trying to build up your sentences in the way the other side wants to hear it.
Yeah, and if you're going to be a dentist, you need to do the same thing, because people are very sensitive about dental pain, right? So if you're going to be a dentist, then you need to understand that some people are very frightened of dentists. And if you want to be a successful dentist, you better deal with that. And if you're going to be a veterinarian, you need to understand that animals are being hit with needles. And so whatever walk of life you're in, if you're dealing with people, then you need to understand how people's feelings affect things. And so these soft skills are very, very important.
But when we spoke about globalism and having access from all sides of the globe thanks to the internet, isn't that also a problem that some cultures are really not used to speak open about bugs and problems and not knowing things? Actually, I was reading a report in a testing magazine yesterday about it, that in China this is a big problem because in China you don't talk about things you don't know or about things that are not working right.
Yeah, that is a huge problem. I just came from teaching in China for the first time, and that is absolutely, that's a big problem. There are certain cultures that have to have additional challenges with testing compared to my culture. In the United States, it's okay to talk to your boss about things you're concerned about. It's not as okay in China to do that.
Mm.
So what we need to do in any different culture that's going to do technical work in teams is we've got to develop in that culture some new ways of interacting. And you know what? We had to do this when the telephone was invented. Did you know that? When the telephone was invented, there was a problem. The problem is, how do you greet someone when you pick up the telephone? And the reason why this was a new problem is because greetings and in those days were very status oriented. You greet somebody differently depending on their rank. But when you pick up a phone, you didn't know what their rank was. So the problem that had to be solved was, what is a good way, what kind of greeting can we agree on is an acceptable greeting regardless of the rank of the person on the other side of the phone with respect to you. And that's where hello came from. Hello turned into the agreed upon thing that was said. But up until that point, there was no one said hello to each other. It's my understanding. They had more specific greetings depending on the language and the culture and the social situation. So what I'm saying is, as new challenges arise socially, different cultures will solve those problems in different ways, and need to recognize that in countries like China, a testing culture still needs to be grown that has ways of communicating that fit that culture, but might be new to allow testers to do their work.
And what do you think about the solution that maybe the culture should change instead of trying it the other way around, that the problem is adjusted to the culture?
Oh, well, the culture will change, but cultures change in certain ways. They don't just change randomly. They change in ways that are specific to that culture. It's kind of saying if you have a couch in your house, you can, and the couch is not pointed in a useful direction, then you can move the couch, but you can't just move it anywhere because it's a couch. It's so big. So there's limited options. You might decide to move your television to a different place in order to accommodate the couch. So, cultures are always changing as the needs arise, but we need to find ways. Each culture needs to find ways of changing that are acceptable to it, and so we see that different react in different ways to testing as well. It's a real challenge for me because I teach a form of testing which is sort of like a mental martial art, and it's an individualistic kind of thing. It's a matter of personal responsibility and ethics, and I teach a rather direct approach to doing it. So adapting my methodology into an environment where you never want to hurt the feelings of your manager, you never want them to feel embarrassed, It it's hard to do, but I think the way it's going to be done is people who study my methods, who are Chinese, will find a way to do it. They'll figure this out, and then they'll tell me. So I'm partnering with some Chinese testers right now who are working on this problem, and we'll figure out what to do. There's got to be a way to do it.
So you see yourself not only as a testing pioneer, but also as a kind of a social pioneer?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I am already for a different reason, because because I dropped out of because my son dropped out of elementary school. I don't believe in the propaganda that we should all get student loans and everybody has to go to university. I think that's terribly damaging for the world community of thinkers. So I'm already regularly attacking that idea, and that to me is more important than testing. But yeah, in the test community, I'm trying to use the same sensibility. My father wrote a lot about personal liberation, and I'm trying to help people become liberated too.
I see. So that's your bigger task next to...
Yeah, liberation. Liberation is my big task. That's right. Liberation. That's the most important thing to me, which really is a problem for me, actually, because I'm also I have a patriarchal personality. So I have, on the one hand, a personality that is would be very suitable for an Afghan warlord on one hand, and on the other hand, I have this belief in freedom for everybody. And these two things are always warring inside of me. They're always struggling inside of me. The part of me that wants to give commands and have my commands be listened to. And then there's the other part of me that says, well, I can do that, but now I'm going to destroy the social fabric if I do that, so maybe I won't do that. This is a struggle that's inside me. It's also inside a lot of people, especially a lot of men, who are, opinionated, domineering type men. We have this struggle. On the one hand, we want to throw our weight around, and on the other hand, we want to be loved. we want to be good people. And so this is, for the modern man, this is a real important struggle that must go on inside of us. For me, liberation wins out. For me, that's although I grumble and I want to be obeyed in one sense. I want to just tell people. There's a part of me that just wants to tell people what to do and have them just shut up and do it. I learned, partly from being a father, that that doesn't work. That's not how I'm going to keep my son off drugs. My son has never taken a sip of alcohol. He's 20 years old. He's never had alcohol before. I'm surprised by that. I didn't ask him never to drink alcohol. I didn't want him to drink, but I didn't expect him never, ever, ever to drink. But I achieved that not because I told him no. It's because I gave him the power to choose for himself. And he chose what he chose. I told him the same thing that my father told me, which is, I'll be frightened if you drink. That will make me frightened. Okay. I hope you don't drink, son. I hope you don't do drugs, because I'll be scared and I'll be worried about you all the time. That's what I told him, and then he made his own choices. And I did the same thing in response to my father saying the same thing to me. I decided not to drink, Now, I
That's
do drink a
actually-
little bit. I drink a little bit socially, but alcohol never played a very big role in my life. I think it plays a big role in a lot of people's lives because they do it to rebel against their parents, against the control that their parents have. That it's a symbol of doing of living your own life and doing what you want to do. Alcohol is even sold that way. It's the alcohol ads about, alcohol are ads about, woohoo, you only live once and you do what you want and you're a free person and all that, so drink up. But if you already feel free, then you don't feel it to do stuff like that. And you might do it anyway, but you don't. There's not that extra edge on it. And so for me, I just find that giving people that I care about freedom is actually what makes them want to do what I say. And that's how my inner warlord and my inner pacifist work together. They've made this accord that the best way for me to get my way is try to force people to follow me. I'll be followed better if I'm a good person and I have good ideas and I work hard on my own personal excellence. People will want to be like me, just like I want to be like my father, or I want to be like Jerry Weinberg, or I want to be like Ken Kaner, and they don't have to force me to do that. They've won my respect, and so I will win other people's respect, and then that's how I'm going to get lots of followers.
So
and then
so if you have this social responsibility and this social ideals you're trying to follow, you must have a lot of inner conflict when you are traveling to some places in some countries where the social environment is so much different from what you stand for.
Not really.
No?
Here's why. Oh, yeah, here's why. In my field, I'm famous, so I'm only hired by people who know me, and they know my personality. They've seen my videos, they've read my blog, so they know what they're getting. It's like if you hire someone who's a famous comedian, then to do something for you, you don't complain that they're always cracking jokes. Like, oh, he's never serious. He just makes fun of everything. Well, you knew he was a famous comedian. You hired him to do that for you, so this is not surprising. So, I have a lot of opinions and a potent personality, but people hire me to do that. They hire me when they want to hire someone who is ruthlessly honest.
Okay.
But also, I try to be ruthlessly honest, but I also try to be caring, and people who want to be around someone like that are the people who hire me. So it doesn't really matter what culture it is, because in any culture that when I'm hired, I'm the senior guy. I'm getting older, I'm 48 now, so these days I'm usually the oldest person in any group of testers that I'm dealing with. I used to be the youngest, now I'm pretty much the oldest. And when I get together with consultants, I'm not the oldest consultant, but as time goes on, that will be more and more the case as well. So people look to me as I'm an authority figure. Whether I say I'm an authority figure or not, they assume that I am. And I have confidence in what I'm saying, and I know how to say it. So I think that ends up trumping any other cultural differences. They just assume that it helps that I've got a beard and I have a loud voice, and there are certain universals that people understand, and one of them is loud, opinionated men. This isn't a universally understood idea.
So you think when you come to countries with different cultures, they are like oh, his experience is good, but be careful, he has a strong personality or something.
Yeah, they know that. I mean, one area I teach a lot in is Sweden, and Swedish people have a much quieter approach than I do. But I go to Sweden 3 times a year, and I teach there, and my stuff is quite popular in Sweden. And I think they look at me and say, well, he's a loud, crazy American, but he's got interesting ideas that we can use.
What was the most unique country you have been?
Most unique country. Well, okay, for me, so far, I would say South Korea has been the strangest, and secondly, China. So those are the countries that to me are if you mean by unique, if you mean the countries which are require me more than any other countries to adjust what I do and what I say and how I say it, that present special challenges to me, then so far it's South Korea and China, and it's because their attitude about management is so different than mine is, and they have a much stronger idea about hierarchy than I. I'm actually kind of comfortable in a way with their hierarchical notions because, like I said, I have kind of a warlord inside me that just wants to command and be obeyed. And so I don't mind hierarchy, except for the fact that I'm not teaching managers. I'm teaching testers to talk back to those managers. So although I believe in hierarchy, my job is to subvert the hierarchy in a certain sense. Of course, the way that I do that in countries like South Korea or China is I try to explain that they are serving. They are serving by questioning. They serve by raising doubts. That's how they are helping in their hierarchy. And so that's how I try to spin it.
So you actually force people to act against their normal culture.
Well, I'm trying to spin it as they're not acting against their culture. They're acting in favor of their culture by questioning, by challenging. That's how they're serving. These cultures are cultures that believe in respecting elders, respecting those in power.
But as the
Right?
testers are younger, you have the opposite case in this section.
Why is that
Because
opposite?
if you say the elderly people are more respected than the younger ones, but the
Yes.
testers you said earlier are younger than the managers.
Right.
And
Right.
but if they talk back to the managers and complain and question, then you have
Yeah.
exactly the opposite case that would go against those cultures in a way.
But that's only if you think of questioning as somehow not serving. But what I'm saying is that questioning and challenging is serving. It is how we serve. It's like when if I have a child and I'm taking care of a child and the child wants to have candy all the time, and I say no, you can't have candy. I'm serving that child by preventing him from having candy. When I keep food out of reach of my dogs that I know will kill my dogs, I'm serving my dogs by doing that. Now my dogs want the food. My dog would be happy to eat chocolate and onions and garlic and things that would kill him. He'd be happy to do that. I have to prevent that. I prevent that not because I'm acting against my dog's interests, but because I love my dog to continue living. So when I act in a way that is against the first order wishes of my clients or management, it is always because I am serving them. And that's what we need to emphasize in testing.
But have you ever had a case where all your suggestions were wasted and companies did it their own way anyway?
Oh yes, that's mostly what happens.
Seriously? Mostly even? Why mostly?
Yeah. Well, because I'm an outsider. I'm an outsider, and it's the same thing again as being a parent. Anyone who's a parent will know that most of their advice is ignored. Most of a parent's advice is ignored by their children. Some of it gets through, and some of it gets through eventually, but not immediately. Some of it never gets through, but some does, and the fact that some does is why we keep trying. Usually I will talk to management and I'll make recommendations, and they take some of the recommendations and they ignore others. But this is as it should be. They are responsible, not me. They're responsible for making things work. I'm going to give them the best advice that I can. But they have extra concerns that I don't have. For instance, I'm going to be leaving in a few days, but they're going to still be there. So they may not want to do certain drastic things that I'm willing to do, but part of the reason I'm willing to do it is because I don't have a relationship with those folks. I don't have an investment in those particular people. So I might. I remember I was fired after 90 minutes on one job. Fastest I ever got fired was 90 minutes. I had 2 45-minute meetings, and then I was fired. And one of the reasons I was fired is that I had worked with a particular person on that project before, and I told the manager of that project that in my opinion, the project could not succeed unless that particular person was removed from the project. And they didn't like hearing that. Now the thing is that I had direct experience working with that person, and the person I was talking to had no experience working with that person. She just didn't like a consultant coming in and immediately saying, you have to fire that guy. But I felt like that was the thing I needed to say. That was the truth. It was the truth as I saw it. It was the best advice that I knew how to give. And if that means that they ignore that and hire a different consultant, then that's what they should do. I always have to be honest. If you're going to be someone who respects yourself as a consultant, then you need to be honest. There's lots of consultants who are not honest. They also don't respect themselves. They hate their jobs. Yeah. They don't have public reputations for integrity, but I do. And I'm proud of that, and I want to maintain that because it's expensive. I paid a lot. I paid a lot for my reputation for being direct and honest. And if anybody finds out that I have not been direct and honest, and that gets out in public, why, my reputation will be ruined. It'd be like if Mr. Rogers was arrested for domestic violence or something. It would be terrible. So I have to be. I have to give the best advice that I know. I try to give it in a reasonable way. I try to be friendly about it. But if that means I'm going to say something that's going to get me fired, then I'll move on to the next client.
So we spoke about your troubles. Let's talk about what was your most successful job so far. What do you think?
My most successful job was as an expert witness in a patent infringement lawsuit where my side won the lawsuit based on evidence that I gathered in my testing, and I was very well paid for that, and the jury agreed with my side that we were right, and it was a tremendously exciting experience. I would love to do those all the time. If I could just do expert witness assignments in patent infringement lawsuits, boy, that would be great. You know, I'd make a couple of $1 million a year, and I would enjoy myself tremendously. I might have a heart attack from all the stress that's involved, but it would be almost worth it.
Ooh.
Yeah, every time I'm on a court case, I buy a new car and go on a cruise. It's great. I recommend it.
And how about the testing? A company that improved because you gave so much help to them?
You mean at a company that I tested for like a product?
Yes, that you, for example, you taught testers, and then you
Oh,
saw, okay,
yes.
the company made a head start, and
Yes.
they really listened to all your suggestions and recommendations.
Yes. Yeah, that would be Barclays Bank. I worked with Barclays for 3 years, and they transformed their attitudes about testing until the guy in charge of all that testing left. It was on a great track. Unfortunately, they changed their CIOs, and their new CIO was determined to undo all the work that we did. So that's too bad. It just goes to show that, you know, management has a lot of power to screw up an intellectual environment. But for 3 years, instead of having a bunch of silly metrics and templates, they were approaching testing as an intellectual craft, and they were systematically training testers to do that craft. Now, this is a slow process because you've got to change a culture from a culture of following rules to a culture of developing a personal reputation. And you also need to institutionalize certain aspects of training, which elite military organizations do, which happens in the medical industry, where they systematically train doctors, and it happens in the air transport industry, where they systematically train pilots. And I want testers trained and technical people trained in a similar way. And they were doing that at Barclays Bank. Now that's over with because the key guy at Barclays left. But some of the people who are at Barclays have gone to other places now, and that's why I'm going to Abu Dhabi now, as someone who had worked at Barclays Bank now works at a bank in Abu Dhabi, and I'm going to go do the same thing there. So that was very satisfying.
So if you had a company to choose from to work for, what would be the company in your favor? Is there any company that you say you really would love to work for them and to work with them?
I'm not interested in working for companies. I work for people. I work for specific people. So I can work for my brother, my wife, or my colleague Michael Bolton, or my colleague Keith Klain. Keith Klain is actually the guy who was in charge of all the testers at Barclays. He now works for Doran Jones. I could work for Keith Klain. I could work for Michael Bolton, or for my wife, or for my brother. And the reason why I can do all these things is because 3 of those people are people that I can yell at, and they will listen to me even though I'm yelling at them, and they will understand what's in my heart. And then the 4th one is someone I never need to yell at or ever want to yell at. That's my wife.
Okay, I see.
And she actually owns my company. I gave her the company right after I founded it. She owns 70% of Satisfice Incorporated. And so technically I do work for her, and she makes my life very nice.
I see. Well, this would be all my questions for now.
Oh, what?
Is there anything I missed you would like to add?
Well, I think you've covered things pretty well. I guess I should just say that in addition to writing a book on education called Secrets of a Buccaneer Scholar, I also wrote a book on testing called Lessons Learned in Software Testing that people should know about. And if you've got any testers who watch this who are interested in test coaching, they should contact me on Skype. And if I have time, then I will work with them. And I often have time. One thing that makes me want to make time for people is if you try hard. Anyone who tries hard to learn and make themselves better, I'm going to give them more time, because eventually they're going to be famous. They're going to be well known for their ideas, and I will take full credit for that when I'm talking to my friends. So that's how it works. All right, that's it.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for doing the interview, and I wish you good luck with your further projects and with your testing job. And hopefully your plan of doing more online education and traveling less will become a reality.
Yeah. Let's hope, and let's also hope that we can stop the standardization of our craft. Hopefully, we can roll back the ISO 29119 testing standard, which is complete nonsense, and stop certification from taking over the craft. I'll work very hard on that.
Why do you think certification is a bad thing? I mean, it's something that companies try to actually get certified in a way, or testers trying to get a certifier in a degree. Why do you think it's a disadvantage?
Oh, well, let me put it this way. If the certification is all based on my stuff, then I guess I don't mind. If the standardization is all based on my stuff, if the standardizers say, you know what, let's just do what James Bach says, then I guess I wouldn't mind so much. I would still mind, because I would say to them, hey guys, just because I think this is good ideas, just because I believe something doesn't mean you have to believe exactly the same thing. So I would be a little nervous about that. But what we're really talking about here when you talk about standardization is you're talking about one group of people that wants to take over all of testing. They want to colonize testing with their ideas, whatever is convenient for them. They don't want an open marketplace of ideas. Certification and standardization both require some group of people to decide for everybody what is right and best in testing. Unfortunately, we can't agree on what is right and best in testing. Again, you could agree with me entirely, and then that would take my argument away. But they haven't done that so far. So what that means is, I've been working in testing for 27 years. I've done a lot. I'm quite famous. I've written tremendous amounts of stuff about this. I've been teaching my class publicly since 1995. I've spoken at basically every significant conference in the world for practitioners on testing. So no one can say that I'm some sort of fringe guy who no one's ever heard of before. No one could say that in the testing field. Google me. More hits about software testing will come up for my name than for any other name. I win every Google fight in testing. And yet I, the most famous tester in the world, am saying that you should not create a standard based on my ideas. You should not create a certification based on my ideas. I'm speaking up for liberation and freedom. So who are these people who want to define testing in such a way that people have to do what they say, or else they're not allowed to be considered testers? What right do they have to close down the craft like that? It's ridiculous. It's unethical. It's against the good of society, and it must be stopped. The people who produced the ISO standard produced it in direct contradiction to a whole community of people who study intellectual software testing. The people who created the ISTQB certification, they weren't even testers who created that. They just saw a marketing opportunity in the testing field. And they were just a group of German businessmen who decided that they would do this. It's awful.
Actually, I was reading an article about this certification company that you just mentioned, and they wrote from their perspective that the reason they created this certification is because there was this problem that companies wouldn't find people that left universities and got any idea in testing. So to have some kind of standard that companies can rely on when they hire staff people as testers. That is their perspective.
Yeah. Okay, here's the perspective of people who create fake cancer cures. Their perspective is the reason why we created this rhino horn extract to cure all cancers is because there's a need. People who have cancer, they want to get cured. And they want to know that there's a cure out there. So we tell them there's a cure and we sell them this cure. So that's why we did it. This is what the ISTQB is saying. They're saying people want something, and so we give them this thing. But what they're giving them is not a solution to the problem. It's a fake cure. And they for this fake cure. They're taking advantage of the ignorance and fear of people who, they don't know any better. They see something like International Software Testing Qualifications Board, which is just the name of a company, and they assume that the United Nations must have given them a charter, that this is an official government body. Well, no, it isn't. It's a group of business people who are trying to get your money, and they're not respected by anyone who knows how to test in the entire field. No, not a single person that I respect as a knowledgeable tester, not even a testing consultant, just a knowledgeable tester, would say that the ISTQB knows anything important about testing. What the ISTQB did is they trolled around the internet, and they gathered things that and plagiarized from things, including from my work, that anyone could have just gotten off the internet, and they put it together in one place. They didn't do any particular quality control with it. They didn't subject their ideas to any criticism. In fact, they systematically screened out criticism from people like me, so that they could complete their work. So they produced a syllabus of what I consider to be garbage. They aren't teaching people how to test. People who take the ISTQB classes would have been better off if they had never taken those classes at all, if they want to be good testers. Just as if you took a class in Galenic medicine, which is the form of medicine that dominated Europe for 1,500 years before modern medicine, you would not be moving along on the path of being a good doctor. You'd be hurting people if you practice Galenic medicine on them. Okay? So I feel very strongly about this. I want to have an excellent craft. And when these people come in and make a profit on the ignorance of others, it should be illegal. If I had lots of money, I might sue them. But suing people takes a lot of money, so I'm not able to do that. All I can use is my voice.
Of course. So now let's see, on the other hand, what, in your opinion, is required to be a good tester, and what should company look for when they hire people as good testers?
The number one thing that a tester needs is an enthusiasm to learn, learn. Testing is all about learning. You're constantly learning about the product. You could say that testing itself is just learning about the product. It's learning the exact status of the product to the best of your ability to learn that. If you have someone who, when they hear about a new feature to the product, they say, "Oh no, another thing to learn. I'm so sick of learning new things." That person should not be a tester. So you as a tester, you must know this, that that you have to be excited, you have to be curious, you have to be interested in seeing its ins and outs, or else you're going to do a bad job. If you don't care about this stuff, if this technology doesn't turn you on, then you're just going to poke at it a little bit and go, "Oh, I guess it's all right." You know, it's easier for us to test things that we're interested in than things that we're not interested in. And a lot of people they try to find companies that have interesting technology so that they can get excited about it. I've taught at video game companies where the testers were super excited about the games that they were getting to test, and they put a lot of their heart and soul into these things. So I would think that number one thing is excitement and enthusiasm about learning technology. Aside from that, there's other skills that are helpful. But that depends kind of on what sort of tester you are. There's different kinds of testers. Some people are social testers and they use their social skills. Other people are technical testers. They use their technical skills. I'm an analytical tester with some social and some technical aspects. So I mostly use my analytical skills. What that means is that I tend to test by making diagrams, outlines, mathematics. That's my preferred mode of testing. But I'm also pretty social. And I also am a programmer, so I've got the technical stuff too. There are some people who their approach to testing is highly methodical. I call those administrative testers. Their number one thing is keeping themselves organized and making sure they've touched every little thing. And there's a benefit to that kind of tester as well. There are empathic testers. Empathic testers try to feel what the user's feeling, and they have a problem in that they have a hard time explaining what they do. It took me years before I recognized that empathic testers were a thing. I just thought they were not very good testers, but I came to realize after some years that that empathic testers, even though they have a hard time explaining themselves, they can do a really, really good job of finding important bugs quickly, and I shouldn't make fun of them. I should help them. So depending on the kind of tester that someone is going to be, they're going to have different skills. Obviously, if you're a technical tester, you have to be very comfortable with programming. If you're going to be a social tester, you need to be very good at talking to people, especially interviewing people and getting them to answer your questions. So how do you ask questions in a way that makes the developer want to help you, want to answer your questions? You can't just go up to a developer and say, "Well, what are the risks?" You can say something like, as I start to test this, do you have any concerns about the product that I should know about so that I can pay special attention to those? The developer is much more likely to give you an answer to that second question than the first question, even though they're basically the same question. You're basically asking them what are the risks in both cases. But in the first case, it's tougher for the developer to rise to answer that question. It seems like a more demanding question. So there's lots of different things that you can look for, but the number one thing is curiosity, enthusiasm to learn.
I see. Well, is there any way to contact you for people who would like to read more about you or to contact
Yeah,
you for job offers or questions?
My website is satisfice.com, SATISFICE.com. My Skype address is Satisfice. Contacting me on Skype or at my email, which is james@satisfice.com, would be good. My Twitter is James Marcus Bach. But basically, if you go to my website, you can see my schedule. You can see my classes. I've got online classes. I've got all kinds of stuff, all kinds of information out there. So you could check that out. And pretty easy to contact. If you email me and I don't respond, there's only one reason for that, and that was I got really busy, I'm training or something, or I'm traveling, and the email scrolled down below the critical limit. So please email me again, whether you're asking me a question or you're asking me about work stuff or whatever. I always want to answer everybody. And if I don't answer you, it's just a mistake on my part, and I'm sorry for it. So keep trying. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
So, bye.